Football Manager lovers, I, Miles Jacobson, have a huge announcement to make. Dynamic youth rating is coming to Football Manager. Yeah. We have some updated developments on what some people are calling a huge development for Football Manager. It only applies in cases of bylaw 7, 16, 42, and 37. Now, in the other 372 instances, it may or may not apply, but, you know, 1 million copies sold, and we're very excited about that. So. This video goes out to all the people that think Football Manager is paying me to be a mouthpiece. Because one, if they were, this camera would not be propped up on top of an Amazon box. I'm not kidding. Look, that's my stand. That's the stand. And I like to think if I was in Football Manager's pocket, that stand would be much nicer. No, that's not actually the point, though. Today, we are talking about something that I believe Football Manager has misled us on, and that is dynamic youth rating. Something that I have been begging up and down for years, Football Manager to put in the game. I haven't had a very big pedestal to stand on for years, but as long as I've had one to stand on, I've been begging for dynamic youth rating. Essentially what this would mean is that as you do better with a club, as you elevate a club, say in Belarus, as you elevate a club in Ukraine, in Russia, whatever, and you make money, you win Champions Leagues, so on, so forth. You're doing the San Marino Challenge. You're making that team better. That within reason, the ability of the players produced by that nation get better. It's the same effect that the 1994 World Cup had on the United States, where soccer/football went from an afterthought to now a country that can at least produce somebody that can play for Chelsea and Leipzig and Juventus all at the same time. Those kind of catalytic events, which would be myself winning the Champions League in Belarus 2 years ago. That would be the catalyst. And then your nation would improve. And then all of a sudden Belarus would have the Ballon d'Or and we'd be, woo! I mean, great. Messi can only win like 20 more before he's retired, so. But that is not what we got. What we got was the announcement of a dynamic youth rating, and we got the announcement that this was a huge deal that would affect long-term saves and all long-term saves and change everything. And then a month later, we got, well, see, there are a lot of factors. I just want one good thing that allows me to turn Belarus into the best country in the game. Eventually, if I play forever, I want that to be possible. So how does this dynamic youth rating actually works? Well, we've been scouring for responses, and it turns out the kit and caboodle was announced on December 8th. Right in the forums. There's been this debate. There were different people testing it. I didn't want to give credence to those tests right away. People testing dynamic youth rating, because initially we thought it was just buggy. You go and win the Champions League 10 years in the future with a team from some small country, and then your youth rating isn't going up. And the youth rating is the raw number of the quality of players that are produced on a scale of 1 to 200, with Brazil being the best, somewhere in the 160s. A country like Bulgaria, for example, at 72. And if you've watched other videos I've made, it's not the only thing that affects the quality of youth players. The population of the team and things like game importance in the country, where in India would be very low, where on the other side in Brazil, the game importance is very high, probably in a religious category, and like development facilities, all those things. But the youth rating is the anchor to the whole thing, and being able to drive that up and drive that down with poor performance would be nice. After the initial wave of tests, Football Manager responded through Andrew James, who's, I guess, taking care of the forums, with very nondescript answers of the several factors at play immediately, harkening back to what I've talked about in other videos. But he does say, whilst in-game success is one of them, it's also dependent upon a nation's ability to improve their footballing infrastructure. This, I would assume, is referring to the level of development in the country. So like Central African Republic's not exactly going to be on the ball to get a nice 70,000 seat facility made for you and everything, but they're also not in the game. So if you're playing in Moldova, they're not going to be as fired up to build a bunch of new youth facilities as Iceland was. They went on to say, we are aware of issues where smaller nations in extreme periods of growth are not seeing their national youth rating grow. as much as might be expected. So fast forward through a couple more people complaining, a couple more people running tests that, again, I was still not super paying attention to, but what you can pay attention to is what SI says. SI is Sports Interactive. These are the SI forums. Sports Interactive makes Football Manager. There's your mental web. And they said, "Hi all, just wanted to provide an update on this and hopefully some clarification on how this feature works in the game." Thank you, Andrew. The latest update doesn't contain any changes. So there have been people asking about, well, is this going to get updated? Is this going to get patched? We've looked at a couple of examples of smaller nations not improving where it seems like they might, but actually due to the way this system works, increases here are always going to be very unlikely. Here is what I want to point out here. There is an amazing thing that Andrew James is going to do in these paragraphs where he makes it seem like these forces are completely outside of SI's control. I understand the argument that the level of development in a country should impact their ability to produce quality players. I would counter that argument with the fact that in the game, Brazil is classified as a developing state and hammers out wonder kids. They print them, they grow on trees. I know that because I have the editor. I can edit nation details and I can show you that it is a developing state instead of a developed state. There are economic factors and federation financial power, both on a scale of 1 out of 20, of which Brazil is actually only at 16 out of 20. What exactly these things do or represent beyond them being self-explanatory is not something that I can give you. But SI generally tries not to talk about this stuff so that you preserve some of the magic, some of the sheen of the game where you can't just growth hack it, which I generally appreciate. That's not the problem here. The problem is that they're going to admit that this stuff can't change. There's also something you can't see here that I've already mentioned, which is game importance. It's literally not even editable here. You have to go into the pregame editor. And as you can see, I just navigated my way through Germany in the pregame editor into information, and you can see the game importance, which is listed as very important. There's important, unimportant, and completely useless, which linguistically doesn't make any sense. That's not the point. You are now armed with the same amount of information that I was going into reading this forum post, and that's the reason I'm so frustrated. This is the official explanation from SI as to how exactly the dynamic youth rating that was promised, again, and somebody actually quoted it, which I think is hilarious. Miles on October 15th, a huge change for long-term saves, and goes on to say that the youth players coming through in different nations will change depending on that nation's standing in world football. On October 15th, while hyping up the game. Now let's look at December 8th. You have all of the ammunition you need. The main factors involved in these calculations are a nation's state of development, economic factor, FA financial power, and game importance. These fields are all fixed, meaning that the potential for changes to youth rating in some nations is immediately going to be lowered because they have a lower economic ability, they have a lower game importance, which again, you can't even edit with the $5 in-game editor, and their state of development, which cannot change. I find it fascinating in particular that the Football Association's financial power doesn't change as you make, if you start winning Champions Leagues in Belarus, I think the Belarusian FA is gonna get more money. I mean, that is the most logical one to me. The nation's development and economic situation are kind of disconnected from the sport. The FA financial power is not, and neither is the game importance, by the way. But anyways, a few areas that have been mentioned by some users as potential factors do not actually enter into these calculations. For example, the national team ranking or financial status of clubs in the nation. What the dude? Are you serious? Andrew, this is not your fault. I realize you were just explaining what's going on. Change depending on the nation's standing in world football. If San Marino is the #1 country in the world, that will have no impact on the dynamic youth rating. None. Zero. They will still be producing melons. How? Zero? There wouldn't be another like, hey, maybe we should build another training. Let's build a playground. Financial status of clubs in the nation. We've already covered that should have some sort of impact, especially in a game that in most facets is very good at creating intricate, interconnected webs of things impacting other things. The butterfly effect in Football Manager is real. One thing impacts a million other things and it just trickles all over. And yet somehow that doesn't happen with the financial status of a club in a country. National youth rating is not the only factor that determines the quality of youth players in a nation. And in cases, there are the other factors have already been improved, such as youth facilities at top clubs, can actually make the national youth rating less likely to increase. This is not as crazy as it sounds. This basically means that as the facilities get better, so say I'm my Belarusian team again, and as I improve my facilities, the national youth rating is less likely to improve, because what the national youth rating is essentially is the country's investment in being able to play the game. So this is Iceland building playgrounds everywhere, fields everywhere, so that every little kid can play. That's what the national youth rating is. So as you improve your youth facilities and you improve your junior coaching, whatever, the country feels less inclined to invest in it. That's how it works. That doesn't mean it's not stupid, right? But that's how it works in the game. So what he's saying there at least makes sense. The reason for this is that the national youth rating applies to all clubs in the nation and is quite an abstract concept to actually define, which of course it is your job to define that abstract concept, but we've mailed it in on this one. But if a nation with low spending is already seeing improvement in the quality of young players due to improvements and investments made by clubs, then the nation itself will deem further investment into grassroots structures less necessary, as the improvement in quality is already happening. So the national youth rating can actually not go up because you are succeeding, which, given the way that we now understand that the mechanics work, this is the first time that I'm being explained that this is exactly what national youth rating is the investment in grassroots development. Because you are already leading to that on your own as a club, the nation's not going to do it. And some nations will actually be more likely to see an improvement to national youth rating if the amount of foreign talent in their league starts to increase compared to domestic talent. I mean, I don't even know what to do with that one. It's a self-explanatory sentence, but it basically means that the way to make the national youth rating go up is because you're tricking the country into believing they're not producing enough quality players for their league because you have 85 Brazilians in your team instead of any Belarusians, and so they then invest more into the grassroots movement, assuming there's enough money and interest in the game to make those improvements. So you need a good economic situation, you need a good game importance for that to actually happen. I hope that all makes sense. I've already taken notes in this thread regarding how we can go about improving this feature in the future, but I hope you can appreciate that we want to keep things realistic. It's a tight line to walk when we're trying to deal with situations that users may achieve in the game which there's very little precedent of in real life. Full stop. If you have further questions, please let me know, and then just vitriol. And I don't pity anybody that has to read and respond to all of this stuff in forums. Like, it's just a nightmare, and this is not Andrew James's fault. But I have a few ideas. I understand the desire to make Football Manager hyper realistic, and it always is going to be. You know, the only thing that's not hyper realistic in Football Manager is that I can take charge of PSG and win like 10 Champions Leagues in a row. Me, I have no qualification to do that. I have no coaching ability in real life. I've played this game obsessively for years, and I can take over PSG and win the Champions League. Me, 25 years old. I can make myself 25 years old in the game. I can take over PSG and win the Champions League. I couldn't do that in real life if I tried 1,000 times. None of the players would listen to me. But even if you remove that obstacle, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. So there is an inherently fanciful aspect of Football Manager, and that is that we are in it. It is not a design simulator to perfectly replicate what is possible in real life. It is supposed to replicate what is possible in a fanciful real life to a hellishly real extent. And as such, I think the dedication to hyper-realism when it comes to the youth ratings of countries is overblown and ineffective for the imagination of the Football Manager player base. I think myself and a lot of you would really enjoy the ability to, over 100 years in a save, take a country like Belarus and turn it into one of the finest talent producing factories for soccer/football anywhere in the world. I would love that opportunity. And right now that opportunity is not provided. Now, there are different ways that you could go about doing that, whether you want to make all of this stuff dynamic, the economic situation in a country dynamic, the development state of a country dynamic. Perhaps you provide the opportunity for a club to invest in grassroots. Right now, you can only invest in the facilities at your club. But what if I wanted to take all of this money, right? I had this pie chart, right? Let's make a pie chart. If I had a pie chart of all the money I had at Bate when we won the Champions League, and I said, well, shoot, let's cut out 10% of that and invest in grassroots. And if that was an option, that makes all of this more dynamic. I can invest in the club, I can invest in the country as well, and develop everything. I think game importance should be dynamic. And I understand that doing this sort of thing would be very difficult because you don't want to make it unbalanced, but there's only two directions you can miss. You can make it not go far enough, and you can make it go too far too fast. When you simplify it that way. This is not something that should be super hard to do. You gotta try. I mean, most people that play Football Manager don't make it past 10 years in a save, and that's perfectly fine. It's a video game. Play it however you want. But for the people that use it for simulations, for the people that like to play, or at least like to start a save, they might not make it past 10 years, but they want to start a save knowing that if they do really well, that country's gonna be great, and they're gonna produce great players eventually. I'm not saying all of this should be immediate. I think the game would suck if it was all immediate. And in 3 years, all of a sudden I win the Champions League in Belarus and I'm Brazil. That's not how it should work, but it should be possible, because in Football Manager, almost everything is possible. But to go out and call this a huge change when you have all those factors that are limiting it, it's just not true. This is a nothing burger. It does nothing. And dynamic youth rating will continue to do nothing until it's changed, until what I'm talking about is made somewhat dynamic, until it can change, until you can actually change the way that the country that you're managing in thinks about the sport through your success, which in my opinion has multiple real world examples of it happening, but Football Manager doesn't believe that. I love how interconnected this game is, but right now how interconnected this game is killing the ability to start long-term saves and really accomplish the most base of all long-term dreams in Football Manager, which is to change the fortunes of a whole country. I mean, we have talked about this on stream a lot. And if you want to watch the stream, you want to bring up these sorts of things, have these conversations, the link to Twitch is down in the description. I stream 5 days a week playing Football Manager. I hope to see you there.